Brilliant. Well, thanks everyone for your time for today's session. I really appreciate obviously taking your time to join this. I feel right now is an important time to be discussing what's going on with digital ID and DBS. We're very much getting close to that kickoff point for right to work. So it's more so for them that there's an ongoing discussion with the DBS batch. You can still continue for the time being. We're doing some of the remote, but the move towards technology is very much on its way. This session very much is to talk about what services are available through the partnership that is in place between First Advantage and TeamKinetic, and talk about what all of that flow looks like, give you an idea of what's there, and then also let you know how we're actually doing this. There's always that question of, it's always great to see it, but in practice, what's actually powering it? Is it all certified? Is it all correct? From a compliance point of view, is everyone happy with this? So we'll cover some of those points for you as well. As a really first introduction to who I am. So I'm Allan Merrifield. I'm one of the individuals from the commercial team at First Advantage. I've been with the business for roughly 5 years. We originally started way back in the day as GBG with our online disclosures product. Some of you may have heard of that. And we came into First Advantage through acquisition in April of last year, which was a really big change, a period of change over 12 months actually, which was great actually, because we've been able to have the exposure of having more investment in the services that we're providing. The organization GBG we're working with, we were part of the wider initiative with what they were focusing on, which was identity data intelligence. But First Advantage is a background screening company at heart. So everything's really focused on what we're doing, which means that we're able to better support partners, better support the products, better support customer requirements, specifically related to background screening. I know that some of you on here are customers of First Advantage and potentially previously GBG. So it's great to have you on board. And as always, if there's any questions about anything that's relating to your existing services, please do obviously direct those to your account managers. But if you have any questions for me, I'll try and answer those during this call if it's related to what we're going through here. So conscious some of you may not know who First Advantage are. So I'll just give you a bit of a brief introduction to the business. So First Advantage is one of the leading global background screeners. So we process in excess of 93 million screens per year on around about 17-18 million candidates. In the UK alone, that's currently looking upwards of around about 1 million. And from a DBS perspective, we process one of the largest amounts of DBS checks and one of the largest DBS umbrella bodies, which goes back to the days of when we were running the checks through the online disclosures product. And we've had a significant tenure with our customers over a period of time, which has stayed with us. Some of the key customers that I've worked with personally within the volunteer and the sporting sectors include the likes of the Football Association. And we've been supporting those guys actually since the inception of the original CRB checks years and years ago when it was paper checks. So going back to 2003. And we've supported those customers continuously through this journey where we've gone from being originally TMG CRB, if any of you guys remember that name, to then on to GBG Online Disclosures when everything went to online. And then now with First Advantage and looking forward, moving more towards the Know Your People product. So we're on a continuous journey of evolution and supporting those customer changes and customer requirements and industry changes and requirements, specifically around not just criminal record checks, but the wider background screening industry. We've got quite a wide range of customers. So obviously volunteering is a huge part of what we do within the sporting sector, within wider membership organizations, but we also have close links within the likes of education, public sector, all the way through to some of the largest banks in the world. So we've got a really strong breadth of customers there, and that's supported by dedicated teams internally on our side. So we've very much geared up towards supporting those requirements. And as and when new requirements come to us, we scope those out and we try and best support those customers whatever way possible. Digital identity obviously being one of them. So that's effectively who we are as an organization. We are a worldwide organization. We're in 15 different regions with offices globally, and in terms of the EMEA region, which I have responsibility within, we have 3 offices within the UK, and we also have offices in the Netherlands and now Poland as well. So we are ever expanding it, and there's a significant amount of investment to drive forward this region within the business, which is great. In terms of the work we do with partners, it's quite vast actually. We have the likes of relationships with TeamKinetic, whereby we have integrations in place to support end customer requirements. We also engage with organizations who use our services to support their end customers directly. So instead of being that platform they provide, they are the service that's provided to the end customers. And then we also have friendly relationships, for example, with GBG, where we used to be a part of. We have friendly relationships with them just on a working basis, whereby we support each other as and when needed. In terms of what we do with TeamKinetic, though, obviously this is very key to what you guys are doing in volunteering, and the key focus of what we've been discussing, God, Chris, it must be for at least 2 or 3 years now, has been about automating DBS checks as much as possible. So we want to make it as easy as possible for the volunteering sector to be able to process those DBS checks and have less manual requirements and inputs. We know that background screening and DBS checking is probably the most painful part of bringing a new volunteer on board. So it's very easy to go through those interview processes. It's very easy typically to get the reference side of things as well. But the pain point always comes down to when you're doing things like DBS enhanced checks. And some of those can take a very long time. And there's always questions of why does it take so long? What's involved in it? And obviously we try and support customers' questions around those things. Like, for example, when you do an enhanced check and it's taken, let's say, 45 days to come back, it doesn't mean there's anything bad on that. It actually just means that there's an SLA in place with the DBS for when they're being checked by the police. They're allowed up to 60 days. So we try and educate as much as possible about things like that. But there's parts of the process which do take time, which is that requesting of the check, providing the information back, and if you've got a separate platform like TeamKinetic, actually putting that information into another platform, and the manual processes involved to do that. So what Chris and I set out on doing a few years back and really coming to fruition now is what can we do to make this process as quick as possible and as easy as possible for the organizations using the TeamKinetic platform. And the idea is that we can automate it. So we'd be able to have a check requested directly from within TeamKinetic, and that would ultimately feed out to our platform. And that would then send out the request of the candidate to go into a dedicated candidate experience, with results eventually going back into the TeamKinetic platform as well. So the idea is, as a user, you sit within that one system. You never come out of that system. It's just one system you have access to, and that's where you're viewing all the information. That's where you're processing those checks, viewing reports, and really getting an idea as to on a holistic level, actually what's the overall outcomes on a consistent basis to the checks that are being processed. So that's the aim of what we've decided to do here with the partnership that we've been working on with TeamKinetic, is to make this easier for you guys. We've had many customers over the years come to us and say we want to have an integration in place because we're spending X amount of time in uploading documents at the end of the process, and it's taken us the example that I had a few years back from customers. They were doing 3,000 checks a year, but it was equivalent to 1.5 man hours per year, 1.5 people per year to be able to upload those documents. So they were spending roughly £40,000 because this was a London-based organization, specifically on uploading that information into the system. So we were able to support that requirement of doing the integration and bringing that in place to automate it. And that really is the idea here, is we can provide this, but through a partnership with TeamKinetic, actually provide it to customers using the service jointly, from our point of view, free of charge, because the hard work's been done. So we're able to get that integration in place. We're able to leverage that partnership we have with TeamKinetic to make your guys' lives a lot easier. So that's the journey of what we've put together here. And we've since coming across to First Advantage, started the transition of moving more towards a dedicated candidate experience, which links into the Know Your People platform. So some of you who may be using Know Your People will already know the existing candidate experience that's within that platform. But the next step and the next evolution that's coming with digital ID is how can we take that further to make this an easier process for the candidate. So what we've done is we've created something called Profile Advantage. And Profile Advantage is a dedicated candidate experience which has been a part of First Advantage's enterprise solutions for a couple of years now. And it's in the process of going through another evolution at the moment with the inclusion of digital ID. And the idea of this candidate experience was to make everything a lot more conversational, make it a lot easier for the candidates to get through this process and not be overwhelmed with the questions being asked. We've all seen the DBS forms, even the paper forms back in the days where it's a huge form that you have to fill out. And it can be quite daunting when you initially look at it and think, oh, there's a lot of information I need to provide here. So what we've tried to do is make this as conversational as possible for the candidates, make it as easy as possible for them to complete, and try and bring that process of them completing the application down to a few minutes by making it concise with what's being asked of them. And when we think about the next step after that, so the thing that we realized was the biggest pain point. I mean, we've been screaming about this for years. You guys will have been, we have as background screeners have as well, which is that verification piece. We know that traditionally ID verification would take anywhere from a couple of days, if you're lucky, up to a week, on average, maybe 2 weeks, and in some cases even longer. And what we've been aiming to try and do is make that process as quick as possible, because the longer there is that time of waiting for verification to be done, the longer it is before someone can be put into a position of trust without having to be monitored or without having to have other provisions in place, or heaven forbid, having them put in that position without actually knowing what the outcome of their DBS result is. So we've been lobbying for years about this. And this is what has led to this remote ID verification process coming in place. The idea is we can have the candidate go through that journey of completing the application form within a few minutes, and actually at the same time doing their ID verification. So from the point that they hit submit, that can then go to the DBS to make everyone's lives a lot easier when it comes to running these checks. Just a few other bits of information about Profile Advantage as well. So it's an experience for the candidate which can be entirely branded. So if you wanted to have your own brand as an organization within that to give them confidence to go through the process, it's entirely possible to do that. And everything here is supported by a 24/5 customer support facility based out of Colchester in Essex. And that is a bilingual service. If I remember rightly, it's nearly up to 15 languages now that we support going through that service. So if you regularly have candidates who are volunteering, who speak a different language, when they get in contact with our customer support team, they're able to engage in their native language, which will obviously give them ease of comfort as they go through this process if they get to a point at any point in which they get stressed. But hopefully the idea of what we're trying to do with the product is make it as easy as possible that this doesn't happen. So the facilities are there for the candidate to go into, and hopefully it's an easy process for them. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you through what this candidate experience looks like in person and give you a view as to what that digital ID piece actually looks like. So I don't know if you guys have seen what this looks like previously or not. So if you have, you'll just have to bear with us for a little bit of time as we go through this. But hopefully there'll be something here new that you'll learn. And obviously, if there's any questions, please say those at the end. We've got a little bit of time at the end to go through any questions that you have. And we can dig into those and hopefully help you to understand anything you need to about this process. So if you just bear with me a second, I'm just going to very quickly grab the other screen and drag that across. Brilliant. So with the journey you would experience with TeamKinetic, this is a screen you'll probably never see unless you go through that candidate journey yourself. So what you'll have here is the candidate experience that they're going through. This is what they're seeing whenever they're doing these DBS checks. And the way that the candidates get to this is through an email that's sent out to them. So It's an email that can be branded and customized to be specifically akin to your language. We can include hyperlinks to help videos, which you may have put together in your own resources, just to help them with that journey of coming into the background screening process. Once they've selected to go into the process, it's a one-click journey, and it's into an optimized browser. We recognize the majority of candidates now are actually using mobile phones. So it's optimized to whichever device the candidate's on. So if they're using a mobile phone, it'll be a phone. If it's a tablet, it will scale up. And again, if they're on a computer, it will scale even further, and it will match exactly what they're using. So as we go through this process, this first bit where the candidate's signing in, they'll set an account name and a password, so that if ever at any point they need to come back into the process to provide additional information, which typically for a DBS check wouldn't necessarily happen with this new process, but the option's there if it's ever needed. There is the ability to come back into the system, but what they'll most likely see once they've set their password and account up is they'll come through to the authorizations and the terms of service and the biometric authorization and privacy policies to have them accept all of these as they come in. And these are all customizable to the client's requirements. So again, if you have something like this in place already, you can bring that in. And the idea here is that you're making sure that everything's covered from a compliance perspective. You need to ask these questions because you're accessing this individual's data to be able to process the criminal record checks. So we have this as a part of the process. And once the candidate goes through, they can sign for that as they come in. Now, when you're going down the digital ID route, there are a few different ways in which you can approach this. So when we're looking at digital ID, you can use an existing digital ID and reach out to another post office Easy ID service or Yoti service, which is connected into this, or you can create a brand new one. For those who aren't aware of what digital IDs are, these are the IDs that you create typically when you set up a bank account. So when you are taking a picture of a passport, doing a selfie, and you're going through that process of signing up, that's creating a digital ID. The examples here, so Post Office have the Easy ID solution, which it allows you to create an ID within the Post Office app, so that when you go to the post office, you don't have to take your passport. You can just show the app, and that will give you that confirmation that you are who you say you are, and they'll accept that as proof of ID. Yoti are our key partner that support this process. So we brought them in to help build out the workflows that we've created for running the digital ID verification for DBS, but also right to work. And the idea that we chose Yoti was down to the fact that they have several million individuals with digital IDs already. Now, it's not something that you have the majority of the population with having in place right now, but the idea is that over time, as more people engage with creating their DBS checks and going through this process, that more and more digital IDs will start to come about. So over time, you'll see that more people will actually be able to use a reusable digital ID rather than having to create one. Another organization that they're engaged with is actually ASDA. So when you go into ASDA now for age verification, that again is another Yoti solution. So over time, you'll see more and more individuals within the UK have access to these digital IDs. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the journey of actually creating a digital ID, and also actually going through that process of reusing one as well. So in this journey here, we'll go through using one we already have one in place. So we'll be able to reach out to the relevant app. So in this case, it could be the Post Office Easy ID app, and we'll gather some information from that app to pull that back in to the candidate experience profile advantage. And the idea here is that ID verification has already been completed elsewhere. So all that information can be pulled back through from Yoti or Post Office if it's part of that platform, and we can then use that as the ID verification to go ahead with the DBS check. So once that information has been captured, the candidate then goes through that process of completing the application form in that conversational manner. So what we're looking at here is we're just looking at the first name and last name. We'll then get the date of birth from the individual. We'll identify which gender they are, and we will gather the address history. So all the typical questions that you would have as a part of doing a DBS application form, but they're just separated out to make it as easy as possible for the candidate to go through without feeling too overwhelmed with having to present too much information. And in this scenario, once all that information has been captured, it is just a case of hitting submit at the end of the process. And then that is it for the candidate. There's no more ID verification that needs to be done. So from our perspective, that would come to us. We would countersign that, and we would then send that to DBS. That countersign period is a very, very quick process. So when the candidate hits submit within a very short period of time, that is then immediately sent to the DBS as well. Another feature that we're starting to bring into the process for our existing customers on the call is we're also bringing in a ability to rate for the candidate to rate the process, and this information can then be fed back to our customers to help them understand actually how engaged are the candidates with this process. So no longer you're kind of going to be in the dark or have to ask the candidate on maybe the off occasion, how did you find the DBS check-in? You'll have that information on a regular basis, so you can start to keep track of how engaged your volunteers are as they go through this process. So that there is when you go through where you have a digital ID already in place. So what about if you don't have one in place? So you'll need to go through that journey of creating one. So if I just very quickly catch back up to that point within the process. So we go through that process of creating a digital ID. And the way in which we do that would be to capture an ID document and then have a selfie conducted as well. So as we go through this process, the individual will take a picture of their document. And what's going on here is the technology is validating from a visual layer, is that document valid or not? Is it a genuine document? And it will look at things like the security marks on there, the MRZ code. It will look at things like the font size. It will look at the font that's being used, the spacing, the color of the document, and it will cross-reference that with databases of sample documents to understand, is that a genuine document? So the technology being employed here is ensuring that you're not, from a visual layer, you're not being presented with a potentially false document. You'll then go through the process of doing that selfie. So one thing you'll notice here, as the candidate was taking that selfie, is there was a green circle which stayed around their face prior to that green tick coming in. And what's happening there is there are multiple bursts of pictures being taken. And the idea here is that we are trying to understand, is the individual a photograph, so an inanimate object that they're holding up, a photograph there, or is that actually a genuine person? So obviously we want it to be a genuine person. It will then take that selfie and it will look at the facial features and determine from the selfie that's been taken, does it match the individual on the ID document? And the idea is that we're trying to understand, one, is it a genuine person? Is it a live person? But two, is that the person who has presented the ID document, and is that ID document genuine? And this is what all this change is about with remote ID verification. We know this previous journey of doing manual ID verification. You get to see the candidate face to face. You can look at their document. You can look at them. And from a visual perspective, you can understand, actually, yeah, that looks like them. But when you're going through that journey of it being done remotely, it's always a bit more challenging. And what the initiative here was to ensure that when an individual does this remotely, we don't leave ourselves open to risk of a person going through this process, having a DBS check conducted, but coming back as clear, when actually it's a falsified document or it's a falsified application form, because the individual going through this process isn't actually who they say they are. So that's the idea of what was brought in here to help add those security features into that remote ID verification. It doesn't mean that manual ID verification is gone. So obviously you can have that still here. but it gives you the option now for candidates to go through the process and do that remote verification. Once they've done that, the rest of the journey continues as before. So they'll then be able to go through the process and just answer the relevant questions they need to undertake their DBS check. Now, there are a few other journeys which the candidate could have the option to do should you configure the account in such a way, which would be to have a post office ID verification, so in branch post office ID verification service, or have that option of doing that ID verification face to face with yourselves as the volunteer sponsoring or employing organization. So you'd still have those options available for the candidate. And again, once they've gone through all that process, it goes through to that point of we submit it and we get that information out to the DBS, and then obviously it goes into that DBS journey. So that there is the candidate experience of what we've gone through. If we start to look more at actually what does all this mean? Where did this all start from? Where did it all come from? So what was established? Well, I say recently, earlier this year, was the UK Digital Identity and Attributes Trust Framework, and this is a framework that was pulled together by the DCMS in conjunction with support from the DBS and the Home Office to understand what can we put in place to ensure that obviously that security aspect is maintained for verifying an individual's identity when it's not being done face to face. So this was brought into place, and this has been something that's been probably 5-10 years in the making. I remember my first meeting within the organization was a meeting down at Wembley Stadium where we were talking to the Football Association about actually what can we do to make this journey easier. We're looking at a period of time actually where the candidates are waiting for their ID to be verified, and during that process nothing's happening. So we need to be able to do this much quicker, and the answer then was, can we do this remotely with ID verification technology? And being at GBG where we had the ability to showcase this, it gave us the ability to then raise this as a point of debate, and we lobbied for this for quite a few years, to the extent actually that one of our directors were seconded into the DBS to lead on this initiative. So the DBS head of identity, Mark Sugden, previously worked within my team. I used to report into Mark, and he was really key to helping try and drive some of that framework that's been put in place, and that really was to make the ability for us to do that remote ID verification possible. It was a long time coming, and we eventually got to it, and it was kind of the only reason it really spurred on and went, unfortunately, was down to COVID. That's the only reason that everything really has kind of driven forward pretty quickly over the past couple of years, because we realized actually that was the time that we could experience what doing a remote ID verification was like. And we all kind of rejoiced when we had the ability to go, let's go on Teams, let's go on Skype, let's go on FaceTime and do that ID verification without actually having to leave our own homes. And what we saw during that time period was a significant reduction in the time it took to ID verify an individual. But as we've came out of the pandemics and the lockdowns, we started to realize that wasn't something we could do sustainably long term due to the potential security risks associated to it, which is why this trust framework was put in place. And one of the key organizations that we've been engaged with since about this time last year to get involved with that was Yoti. So we officially partnered with them in February of this year. And as a part of that partnership, it included that connection into the post office for the in-person verification. And the idea is that these guys are at the forefront of this technology. So we're really looking to be working with organizations that are looking to be certified and looking to be at the front, at the top of the game. And this isn't to say that that's the only organization we work with, but one of the things that we as a business recognize is that because we're a background screener, we are agnostic to this process. So we're not an ID service provider where we're trying to provide this directly. We're an organization that leverages this technology to better support our customer requirements. And what that means is that over time, it allows us to have this opportunity to go and create additional partnerships as well. So we bring in these organizations to broaden out that scope. So when we look at banks, for example, so we'd be able to connect in with an organization conducting these to be able to do these checks, and that is on the roadmap. We're engaged with organizations to bring that in, and it really is to help drive a better, safer recruitment process for bringing volunteers on board. So that is the initiatives that as an organization we're driving, and that in conjunction with the work we're doing with TeamKinetic, the aim here is really to drive forward with having a really easy candidate experience to use, but also an easy user experience. So no longer are you having to wait 20 days to see a candidate to do their ID verification. It's already been done. And actually within those 20 days, you may have had the DBS result back and you don't have to go into another system. You can see it all within the one platform. And that's effectively what we're aiming to do, is make it as easy as possible for everyone involved. And we're always open to hearing feedback and understanding what more could we be doing to make this life easier for everyone involved in this process, because we've always recognized that DBS checking has been a pain point, and we genuinely want to make that pain point go away. So that is the majority of what I wanted to take you guys through today. It leaves us with a good amount of time to go through questions. So do we have any questions from anyone on this?
Allan, where in the app does the level of check get set? Because the organization now on Know Your People will select whether it's a basic check or an enhanced check. So am I right in thinking that now, once the applicant has kind of filled in the details and submitted, it's actually First Advantage that verifies, not us?
No, so the way in which we work, so in Know Your People, we would set up the job roles in line with what we've discussed with our customers. So if there is let's say a sports coach for under 18s, that would be set up as an enhanced check with child barred list and child workforce. It's regulated activity check. And the way in which you would go through KYP at the moment is you would select DBS standard or enhanced. You'd have a drop down list and you'd select the relevant role. Because of the work we're doing with TeamKinetic, what it means is you have the ability to select that role within TeamKinetic, and then that will automatically feed the information request through to Know Your People. So all of the requests for checks now would be handled through TeamKinetic, and the idea is that it makes it clear for you guys when you go, and you don't have to see the list of all the other checks that are there. You can just go in, I want to do a DBS check for this role, and then that will send the request out, and that will be what follows through with this process.
Okay. Do we still have to get the hard copy IDs from the applicant?
No. So that is handled remotely through the digital journey. If the candidate opts to go down that route, if they've been given this option, they opt to go down that route of doing that face to face with you, then obviously you'd need to go through that process of seeing the documents manually. But the question that we ask is, why wouldn't a candidate want to do that remotely if they're using a mobile phone to do this journey? It's a lot easier nowadays. So in all likelihood, you'll probably not come across this.
Okay, thank you.
I did notice there was a question in the chat from Dolores. So what happens to the ID docs once uploaded and the checks are completed? So the ID documents, if I remember correctly, and I will double check on this, Dolores, for you, and I'll get back to you separately as well. But I believe they're held for a period of either 28 or 30 days with Yoti, at which point they're completely deleted. And that at that point, obviously, there wouldn't be any information that is held then.
Laura's got a good question. When will this be active in TK? We've already built the API with the old Know Your People system. This actually makes our life even easier, this new version that First Advantage have got coming, which is great. But We've been waiting for First Advantage to launch it, which they've done this week, which is really exciting. So I think we're going to let them get through the initial stress of the launch this week. And hopefully in the next week or two, we will be talking to First Advantage to confirm a few bits and bobs. And again, we've got a little group of customers that we've invited. Well, we're not invited. We offered it out to all our customers to see who's interested in joining us on a little bit of a early adopter group to give us some feedback on how it was going to work. And we're hoping to have that up and running this side of Christmas. So again, Flora, if you're interested, we would love to have you in that group. There is a bit of work to do around it. Do you work with First Advantage already? You're already an existing customer of First Advantage?
No, but I am all set up with Know Your People.
Okay, right, that's great. So what we're looking to do, there would be a little pre-work to make sure you've got an account set up with Allan and his guys. Once your account's established, we can turn it on for you, and then we can start to test it with the guys that need DBS doing. And the hope is that we don't just limit it to DBS checks. We know there's organisations that have drivers, and there's other checks that may be of interest once we get this initial DBS pain point sorted out. Another good question, Dolores. Is there a cost per application, or is it an annual fee, or does it differ depending on the checks requested? Allan?
Yeah, so with Know Your People, there are no annual fees. So when you set up an account, there's an initial setup fee because there's professional services resource to go through that process of setting the system up for you. But everything is a pay-as-you-go service. So if you are doing, let's say, 50 checks in a month, we'll provide an invoice the following month for those 50 checks. So everything is on a per application basis. And when you go through the process of doing the ID verification, if you choose to go down the route of using either the digital ID verification or the post office, there is the additional charge for doing that ID verification. However, if you decide to do this directly as the organization with the candidate, then there's no additional charge beyond the criminal record checking processing fee, which you would expect when doing these checks.
Does that help, Dolores? Is that okay?
Hi, it's quicker to speak. I can't type that fast at the minute.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Allan. Yeah, that's helpful. The only thing I'm just wondering again, being a small charity and just thinking of expenditure, are you able to tell me a kind of a cost per application or even a ballpark figure just so I get an idea? Or do you want to message me separately about that?
Yeah, so I'll kind of give a lay of land for everyone on the call in relation to that. So if you have an interest in looking at these services, all the prices are done on a per customer basis. So it's based on volume, and we have a pricing team that set the prices and work with our customers to put something in place. So if anyone has interest in that, and obviously Dolores, if you want to know more about that, we can connect separately offline and discuss what volumes are and then what the prices are in relation to those.
Great. Thank you, Allan. Anybody else have any questions for Allan? No, that's good because we're nearly at the end of the day. I'm sure there will be other things, other questions pop up. And I know, Dolores, you're not currently one of our customers, but the idea for us is it will be embedded in the product. We'll set up that link with First Advantage, and then the billing and all that can be arranged. And it's all really straightforward. It's just another headache we're trying to take away from you guys to make your life a little bit easier. I've got a quick question, Allan, about the update service.
Yes.
How's that going to work?
So the update service is obviously separate. It is a DBS-led service, and when it comes to remote digital ID verification, it doesn't really cross over with the update service. So the way in which the update service works is once the candidate has completed their DBS check, whilst they're waiting for their result, they'll be given if I'm rightly, it's called an E-number. And once they've got their DBS certificate through, they'll have their disclosure number and they can register for a DBS update service account. And obviously, as a volunteer, that's critically important because it's free of charge. I volunteer for St. John Ambulance, and I've done it as well. So I have a DBS update service account. And the idea behind that is obviously if they need to check again in the future, that they have the ability to do that. Remote digital ID doesn't come into that process. So the update service is separate. And the way in which most organizations manage that is the DBS have the portal online, whereby you can go in with a access code and the individual's update service number, and you have the ability to go on there and see if there's been any changes since their DBS certificate. So if anyone goes through that process of doing the update service, you still need to have sight of their original certificate. So if you are the organization that's completed that check initially, and you have that information on record, and let's say TeamKinetic, whereby it says DBS status clear from 2019, then you wouldn't have to necessarily worry about that when it comes to doing the update service, because you were the ones that originally did that check. And if you get the result come back on the update service saying there's been no changes, then actually you don't need to initiate the request for another check. So hopefully that makes sense and how the update service works. It is a separate DBS service that's provided. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Has anybody else got any other questions?
So Alan, sorry, I'm a little bit confused. So can we do that through TeamKinetic and First Advantage? So if we've already done a check through you both, can we then just ask for an update without submitting everything again?
It is something that we're looking at. It's a provision that we've trialed with a few customers. So we have a process in place within our operations team, but it's something that we want to try and refine to make it as automated as possible. So the idea that we internally on our side, to be quite open, internally on our side, it's a resource element to run that service. So we want to try and make it so that we can try and automate the process. So we're exploring different options with the DBS on how to do this currently. And the idea in time is that we can bring this service in to facilitate that update service requirement that customers would have.
Okay, thank you.
Don't ask me for timescales though. There's a lot going on with digital identity at the moment, so we don't have timescales right now for that.
Thank you.
Any more? Okay, well, Alan, thank you so much. I know it's been a busy week with this product launching this week, so I really appreciate you coming, giving us the time. I'm just going to pop the link in for the guys here, so they can dive across to the main room if I can find where I put it, which I can't. Give me a second. Oh, what have I done? There it is. Okay, there we go. I've got the link now.
Brilliant. Well, just something for myself. Thanks, guys, for your time. It's been great to have the chance to speak with you. If anyone has any questions that you want to ask, if you didn't feel comfortable asking it on here, or you want to just have a general conversation after this, Chris, I'm sure you can obviously share my details to everyone.
And we'll share the PowerPoint if that's okay, and so all your information's on there.
Yeah, by all means. So more than happy to have discussions. Even if it is just to have some advice on what to do with the process. There's no obligations for me. I just want to be able to help people with DBS checking as much as possible. It is kind of close to my heart, given the fact that I work within the volunteering sector as well. So I really want to make it as easy as possible for everyone. So please, if you have questions, do let me know.